It might only be spring, but Matt Campbell hopped on a mic, and boy, I'm ready to run through a brick wall. Iowa State's winning a national championship this year. We're talking about it today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today, we're talking football. We are back on the football train ahead of the men and their Big 12 tournament coming on Wednesday. But, of course, there was media availability yesterday for football. We got to talk about it. Matt Campbell got on the mic. We talked about the spring football game, talked about the team as a whole. We're going to talk about both those things. And then in the third segment, we're going to talk about Bryce Popp, the new defensive line coach for Iowa State, and the noise that he is going to make, the way he's going to make this team better come the fall. I can't wait to talk about it. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. Deep breath. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. We are talking football, and Matt Campbell jumping on a mic. The way this man speaks, like, woo! I've been so used to TJ Otzelberger, and nothing against him, but this is a change of pace, and I was all for it. The man spit bars for about 30 minutes yesterday. Tons of nuggets here, there, everywhere. We're breaking it down right now. The first thing, obviously, that came up, well, it's not the first thing that came up in the interview, but first thing we're talking about today, spring game. Is Iowa State going to be playing a spring game this year? There's been a lot of talk about the spring game. Should you play it? Should you not? And Matt Campbell said, well, it's my philosophy on that changed years ago. Everybody's catching up to me. Got a good pop out of the room. I enjoyed that, of course. Matt Campbell's been one of those dudes who kind of just does what's right for the culture, and we'll get more into that, obviously, throughout today's episode. But he kind of just said, hey, every year is different. Sometimes it's great. Get people in the stands, get a crowd around these guys. The young people kind of need that. But at the end of the day, what is best for this team? He said, do we really need, an open practice? Can we have a scrimmage? The one thing he did point towards, obviously, Iowa State playing, that week 0 game a little bit earlier this year. And he's like, that's something we got to take into account here. You only get 15 practices. Is this something that this team needs? We won't know. He said, we don't know right now. I don't know exactly where this team is, but I'm leaning towards no, which is awesome. Okay. He knows kind of where they're at. That's good. That's good news. But the little nugget out of this that we talked about all football season, and then kind of after the Pop-Tart Bowl, after that Big 12 championship, was something we mentioned over and over. He said, I'm not scared about people recruiting our guys. Shoot, they've been recruiting our guys for 4 years. They just keep staying. That quote right there speaks volumes. They say that your silence speaks volumes, sir. He wasn't silent. Those words came out of his mouth. Those are awesome. Those are a great string of words. What a wonderful sentence that was formed right there. And he was asked, kind of about just the spring ball in general now with the amount of guys on the roster. What are we going to do with that? All this, that, and the other thing. And he said, really, it's tough with the culture that we have and we try to maintain. And that's what this is about. The culture that Iowa State has had and probably always will have, at least until Matt Campbell is, what's going on there. He did say, they were like, what's keeping you here through 2032? Is like, shoot, if I make it that long. So I don't know. We're not going to address that. We're not going to touch that. But as long as Matt Campbell is here, culture and the players are number 1 and 2 in priority. And it's obviously paid off. Like, these guys sticking around, very big deal. We'll talk more about Mr. Orange sticking around for the Cyclones and why he did that, of course, when we get to that final segment. But this is beautiful. It really is absolutely beautiful that he notices, this is a culture we've built. This is a culture we hope to maintain. And the players are replicating that. These are guys that they love the culture. They love what's going on inside the building, and they are sticking around for it. So not so concerned about, like, is someone going to steal an Iowa State player? I don't think that's really necessarily on Matt Campbell's radar because, as he said, guys have been recruiting them. They're just not going anywhere. They want to play for the Cardinal and Gold. They want to play for the Cyclones. That's amazing. That is amazing. Now, as far as the actual spring game, where do I land on that? I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I think that the way that this team is structured, pretty active in the transfer portal as far as Cyclones, in the past, how has Iowa State done it? I think this year we were relatively active and getting a lot of these guys integrated into the system early is going to be a smart play, especially with that the week 0 game against Kansas State in Ireland. But more than that, this team was riddled with injuries last year. And to get all those guys back up to speed in an environment where this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is the best thing for the team, for the team, for the team, for the team. That mantra obviously reigns true in the Cyclones locker room. And he did mention, the spring game is great. It's a great atmosphere. Get some fans out there, get to play in front of a crowd, make some noise, make some plays, get to see, what does a scrimmage look like type of deal. But he also said, and it threw me to like the NFL, I want to say pro days. It's not the pro days, Pro Bowl, excuse me. The NFL Pro Bowl, what it's turned into with like flag football and two-hand touches. Like, what are we doing there? I mean, that's cool, I guess. Pretty sure it's an exact quote. Don't quote me quoting that. But either way, the point is, he's like, well, how much value are we really going to get out of a spring game like that? I do think that him taking a year-by-year approach to this spring game is the best way to go about it. Are we going to cut spring games forever because we think people are recruiting our players and stealing them? That's probably not a great play. Maybe there's a team that needs that. Apparently, as it sits right now, as Matt Campbell looks at the guys in his locker room right now, he doesn't think this is necessary. Doesn't think that this is something that this team will greatly benefit from. And I think that's the best decision you could possibly make. I'm not going to lie. I don't, it's like what they say, that only the Sith deal in absolutes. We're not going to stick to a spring game just every single year because that's what we've done. We're not going to cut them all out because apparently people are recruiting our guys. We're just going to do what's best for this team, and we're going to maintain that culture. Boom, boom. Matt Campbell on the mic. Drop it. I mean, that's what this guy's all about through and through. And I mean, he hops on a mic. He's like, immediately, bars. It was amazing. If you haven't seen it, it had me wanting to run through a brick wall. I can see why the guys feel the same way. As far as the actual spring, we'll talk more about what the locker room looks like in the second segment, but I do have a few more thoughts. I do wonder how much that spring game would do for these guys. I agree with Matt Campbell. As I said, get those new guys on the same page, get those injured guys back up to speed. A lot of this team is not new, but not super veteran, right? This team is relatively finding their feet again after a deep run, I guess, obviously with the Big 12 championship and then the Pop-Tart Bowl. Playing in December the way that the Cyclones did, it was awesome. And it's something that a lot of the guys mentioned in their media availability. It was great to get to play in that Pop-Tart Bowl and make those plays at that time of the year and play for something there. And obviously the Big 12 championship game was what it was, but now this team is where they are. That's like the most neutral statement you could possibly make. I apologize for that, but you got to take them where they lay, the cards as they are laid down. This team needs to get back on their feet. No Higgins, no Knoll. Does the team need a scrimmage out there where we're wheeling out third, fourth stringers? Is that what we need to do? Or do we need to get Soul and Xavier Hutchinson more reps in practice, right? Do we need to get the playbook a little bit more instilled? What does Matt Campbell think is best for this team, right? I'm not the head coach. It's not my job, but he knows. He's the one he's got the controller, right? He's the one playing NCAA 25 Dynasty. But in real life, he's the one that's like, you know what? I don't hate, let's not do it. Maybe let's not do a spring game. And I think that's a smart play, especially when you consider the weather here in Ames. I wonder if you go out there, potential for injury. I knock on wood. You could probably hear that. We don't want any of those this year. We had way too many last year. But, I mean, what happens if it's like iced over? That's Iowa weather for you. I mean, it was 70 degrees today, and I think by the end of the weekend, it'll be like 20. So we don't even have to play that card. I love it. Matt Campbell, smart man, knows what the team needs. He's doing it better than anybody, really. Honestly, I've seen some coaching, like, where does Matt Campbell rank? I put him number 1. And I've seen some people saying, hey, Nick's a homer. Yes, of course. Look at the set behind me. Look at this shirt I'll wear. Of course I'm going to ride Iowa State till the day I die. I mean, this is my team, But, biases aside, I do think Matt Campbell has a great feel for the locker room and a feel for what this team needs. And apparently, as it sits right now, he's leaning no spring game. I think that's a great play. Speaking of the locker room, though, a lot of injuries coming back, a lot of guys transferring in. And there's some feelings around the locker room that we have to talk about coming up right after this. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week are the Duke Blue Devils. John Shire's team, led by National Player of the Year candidate Cooper Flagg, just ripped through the ACC, going 19-1. The Blue Devils were plus 434 points in ACC games, the largest point differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky in 1953-1954. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Duke Blue Devils have done here. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. So Matt Campbell jumped on a mic for the Iowa State Cyclones and talked a little bit about what's going on in the program now that we're here in the spring. Here, Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I can't believe it. We've got Matt Campbell news. We got football news. I wrote it in all caps. Matt Campbell got on a mic. I was fired up, ready to run through a wall. I hope you are too. Let's talk a little bit about this team. The first question that Matt Campbell got was about the tight end room. And the first thing that comes to my mind was Gabe Burkle. Dude had an outstanding end of the year, absolute legendary performance. Matt Campbell said, hey, there was a period in time there where he was as good as any tight end in the country, not only blocking, but obviously in his pass catching abilities. And we talked about that, right? We talked about that, especially after the Miami game. Standout in that one for sure. But as a whole, this tight end room, this is a direct paraphrase from Matt Campbell. Feel strong about that room, good as we've ever been, potentially one of the greatest in the country. That seems promising. Does that not seem awesome? Are you kidding me? We'll talk about Rocco and the wide receivers going on there in just a few minutes. Don't worry. But the tight end, something that a lot of people kind of sleep on, right? We've talked so much about, well, not here on this show, but the media in general, about Travis Kelce and his ability to find the hole in his zone, right? George Kittle and his pass catching abilities. You can go down the list for NFL tight ends and how much the evolution of their game in the NFL has been astounding. It really has. And I know I mentioned an Iowa tight end in there. I apologize. I didn't like it either. Okay. There was plenty of other ones I could have gone with. Should have gone with Rob Gronkowski, to be honest, but that's a little bit more old school. At the end of the day, he mentioned Ben, Cooper, Tyler, Bramer, Alexander, Moore, respectively. That room could be absolutely epic, and that's awesome. That is something, obviously, if he's talking about it, good news. And I will say, take all this with a grain of salt, because the spring is the greatest time of the year in football, in my opinion, other than opening day. Well, it's not baseball, but, the first kind of fall Saturday of football season. I think spring is arguably right behind it because everyone's hopes are so high. Everyone feels like their team's winning a national championship, myself included. Okay. And I'm not going to hide it. I absolutely feel that way. Obviously this is where the team is up and to the right. Everything's looking good. So keep that in mind. But I do think Matt Campbell has a very good idea of where this room can be. And the ceiling, if you will, the potential that these guys have, and the team as a whole. Excuse me. And so, as I say that, Matt Campbell being so close to this locker room, he was asked about the vibe. What's going on kind of inside the locker room? Let's take you inside Iowa State Cyclones locker room. And he said, you know what? I'm going to be completely honest. Kind of ticked off after that loss. Now everyone's thinking, well, you beat Miami. That was awesome. That was, everyone remembers that. But the loss in the Big 12 championship game left a sour taste in a lot of, obviously, the Cyclone players' mouths, but everyone that watched that team, we're all thinking that was kind of hurtful what Arizona State did to us. Are we really going to end the season on that? Now, obviously, the win over Miami kind of redeem that a little bit. That was an awesome game. Obviously, getting to celebrate with the sacrificed Pop-Tart and the toaster trophy and everything was awesome. But at the end of the day, he kind of was like, look, we didn't win the Big 12 championship game. It was awesome to get there, but we, sustained success. We got to get back. And he mentioned that the sustained success is something that this team or this, I guess, organization has sort of struggled with in the past. There's an element of maybe some complacency at times. If you look back, is kind of what he said, like, hey, it's not always been what it is now. And there's now, he says, there is an element, a vibe, which is a very much a my generation term, but a sense of non-complacency, a sense of urgency. These guys stepping into leadership roles. And he did mention this team is relatively young, not so much in like their football, like career play type of deal, but leadership wise. Iowa State's losing quite a few leaders from last season. And I'm sure that's something we'll talk about throughout the offseason ad nauseum. I know you can't wait. Honestly, I can't wait to dive into this football team either. It's basketball season right now. This is a one-off. We're talking about football. I'm excited. You're excited. But at the end of the day, there are some guys that are going to have to step up. No Higgins, no Noel, no J.R. Singleton on the defensive line, who we're going to be talking about in a few minutes here. Okay? These guys are going to have to step up. Who is it going to be? Obviously, Rocco was one that was mentioned over and over, especially after the Pop-Tart, well, right before the Pop-Tart Bowl, after the Big 12 championship game, as a guy that's, last one off the field, making sure everybody gets in, everyone's, taken care of type of deal. And that's awesome. That's what we need to see out of a quarterback. And we'll talk about this. Don't worry. There's been some rankings that I put Rocco at number 9. We're not having this whole conversation today, but his leadership needs to be higher than 9 in the country. Okay. Rocco, unbelievable quarterback, and his leadership is going to lead this team to new heights. But, I mean, are you kidding me? What are we talking about here? At the end of the day, there was a few more comments he made. Obviously both coordinators being back is great. There's not a ton of shuffling as far as that goes, and we'll talk about the new coaches, more of this offseason, but in a few minutes here as well. But the last thing he was really talking about in conjunction with that coordinator thing was Rocco and the wide receivers. Asked about how's that going? What are we looking at there? And he said, when you talk about Rocco and the wide receivers, the great thing is you've got Rocco. Bing! That's awesome. Immediately putting Rocco up. This guy is a dog. Rocco's our man, and that's awesome. And we all know just how important Rocco is to this football team, and really to the city of Ames at this point, and what he can do and elevate this program. But immediately getting that nod it's got to help Rocco's confidence. Not that it was hurting, but it's got to feel good. And then on top of that, the wide receivers, he said right now we're just kind of working on building confidence, building timing. Things very important. If you've seen, like, obviously the NFL combine, there were some throws out there that looked a little wonky. Maybe that was related to unknown wide receiver timings. That's very real. That's very, very real. So these guys building timing, building trust, building confidence in each other, very important. That's a very key part to the offense. If they don't know what they're doing, if they don't know where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, Rocco's left hung out to dry, problems, major problems. Let's get that figured out right now. It's what they're doing. Now, I will mention, very important here, in my opinion, Dillard Barrett said that Chase Soule is a dog. He is an absolute key piece to that wide receiver room, a massive addition, if you will. And I mentioned it. This guy is going to be awesome. And Matt Campbell did say we've kind of figured out what we're recruiting for at wide receiver too, so that helps. And Chase Soule and what he said, kind of about him modeling his game after Higgins, and filling that hole. I think he's absolutely poised to do that. And Rocco was asked about it, and he said, both of the transfers, Xavier Hutchinson and Chase, both absolutely we're clicking on all cylinders. Okay. And that's exactly where I want this team to be at this point in the season, because we're not going out and playing next week. We got time. We're going to get better. Don't worry about that. But in the meantime, let's get better. Okay. Let's spend the time. Let's throw a couple times. He said, hey, we can't throw our, we can't run our bodies into the ground. We're only throwing 3 times a week right now because we're lifting and all that, which is what the spring is for. But they're taking advantage of this time, right? We're building up that rapport. We're building up that trust, that confidence, that timing. This is This is all good news to me. I didn't hear one bad news out of all that, to be completely honest. One thing or another, I thought that every answer was perfect from Matt Campbell, and everything I heard was very good news. The way he talked about the guys returning from injury, I thought that was a super good sign. Seems like everyone's going to be able to get kind of integrated back again, and that's really all you can ask for. Those guys are going to go out and ball out, that's for sure. But obviously across the board, Iowa State, great players. I will say the defensive line is something we do have to address, and we're going to do it right now, coming up after this. Attention, Locked On Cyclones fans. Ever wished you could directly support your favorite Iowa State athletes and be part of their journey? Now you can with Roy, the NIL app that puts fans in control. Before Roy, NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear way to directly support the players you love. Now, with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes representing Iowa State. With Roy, you get to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, and get exclusive content straight from the athletes you back. The best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back, so it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of Iowa State sports. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Iowa State athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Iowa State media yesterday. Everyone's talking about it. I'm here talking about it. You're here listening. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's take a look at the defensive line, shall we? Last year was one thing that I certainly looked at in depth. Okay. It was something that I thought was lacking, okay, to say the least. And I've got some statistics here for you. Iowa State last year allowed a passer rating of 112.9, 13th best to my gauge. They garnered 15 interceptions, which was 22nd. They only allowed 165.6 yards per game, which was first per ESPN. They allowed 52.7% completion percentage, which was third best per ESPN. Now, when you look at passer rating, INTs, passing yards, completion percentage, all of those statistics are a larger look at the passing side of a defense. And the defense in football has 11 players. Okay. There are 11 guys out, hopefully, on the field playing defense for the Iowa State Cyclones. Okay. We're not here to talk about all 11 right now. We are here to talk about the defensive line. So I pulled up some numbers for what could essentially be defensive line statistics at a large scale here. Iowa State in tackles for loss had 68 on the year, which is a 4.9 tackle for loss per game average, which was 99th in the country. Not quite on the level of those total defensive statistics. And sacks-wise, only 16 on the year. Take a guess at where that lands you in the NCAA. 129th. Not a great number. The pass rush was something I thought Iowa State struggled with last year, and obviously it helped to have one of the best pass defenses in the league, especially the secondary. That secondary last year was legendary, okay? It was absolutely electric. And that kind of bailed out the defensive line at times. I pulled up some of the statistics from last year. J.R. Singleton led the team with 4 sacks on the year. Your next best was Snyder with 2. And Peterson had 2 as well. But then nobody else after that had more than 1. And obviously, Mr. Orange, Dominique Orange in that list. And we'll talk about him here in a second. Now, the reason I bring all of this up is Iowa State hires Bryce Popp as assistant defensive line coach. This is an absolutely monumental hire for the Iowa State Cyclones. This could be what Iowa State needs to get over that Big 12 championship hump. This defensive line was a major problem for Iowa State last year. I thought it was maybe one of the biggest problems at the end of the day. And then when you look at those leading sack leaders from last year, J.R. Singleton draft, Kennard Snyder gone. I mean, we're missing the top two guys. Just literally looking at the top two, we're missing those two. So that's obviously a problem, right? But then you bring in Bryce Popp, and he can get these guys turned around. Now, when you want to look at the guys we brought in, because we did lose some guys to the portal, obviously Trent Jones, Tyler Onyedem in that list there. But guys we brought in, remember, we brought in Cannon Butler from UNI. We brought in Vontre Malone from Tulsa. And I believe we got a guy from Yale, Yamatoa McDonough. A guy I said that was actually the reason we could win the Big 12 championship next year. Those are going to be huge additions. And Bryce being able to work with those guys is huge. Now, of course, like I said, Tyler Onyedem, Jair Singleton, and Joey Peterson will basically have to be replaced at the end of the day. But Dominique Orange could be the guy that makes some noise. Coming back, everyone was super excited to see him back on the team. And when asked about it, he said, I had unfinished business. I had to come back and show that what I was last year was not the best version of me. I wasn't, I was missing tackles. I can be a better pass rusher. And now remember, defensive line is not solely there to rush the passer. That is something that's a big deal, and it's something that I thought they struggled with last year. But obviously, clogging up holes and stopping the run is important as well. And the rush defense for Iowa State last year was not the best. Now, injured like crazy. I understand that. But this is an area where I think Iowa State can get a lot better, right? You're bringing in a lot of guys. You're bringing back Dominique Orange. And now you've got a new coach in Bryce Popp that is going to turn those guys around, get them right, and just make the best of this crew. Now, I think, obviously, on the back end, the secondary, going to be electric yet again this year. A couple holes to fill there. Obviously, Bo Freeler, everybody loves him, but that's going to be a hole that we've got to fill as well. There's going to be holes all over, right? That's what this every year is different. Every team is different. But I do think that on defense, Iowa State can make some real noise this year and potentially get back to the Big 12 championship game. I'm excited. You're excited. It's spring. Football's kind of here. Let's talk about it. So, obviously, the men and their Big 12 tournament, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But for today, let's just talk some football. I enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. If you're still watching, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. And until next time, Cyclone friends, sayonara.